All right, welcome to another live episode of geekoutdoors.com. And this week, got some varied news, as always, and luckily it's not a security related news, not really. So the three things that we'll be talking about today are first, there's a brand new version of the Linux kernel, one of the biggest releases that we've had for a while. And then the second piece of news is there was a huge Nasdaq glitch, which affected a lot of companies and a lot of people. All right, what's going on, Rose? And I'm sorry. And the third thing is that we're going to be talking about iPhone 8 features and rumors. Okay, so Rose, thanks for joining, and thanks for anybody else who's joining on this weekly live show. And so let's get right into it. So if you didn't know, there is a brand new version of the Linux kernel which was released on Sunday, July 2nd. It's actually kernel version 4.12. And okay, Rose is saying that you can't hear me on there. It should be okay. So my volume should be on. Let me see. Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that working? Maybe it was because my microphone wasn't on, or my volume wasn't on. Okay, it's working now. Okay, sorry about that. I guess my volume was all the way down on my phone because I am recording live on my phone. Okay, so thank you, Rose, for making that point. Let me go ahead and recap what I just said earlier because everything was muted out. First of all, thank you for everyone joining this live episode of Geek Outdoors. And this week, we'll be covering three different things. The first thing is the brand new Linux kernel that's just been released. The second thing is the Nasdaq glitch. And finally, we're going to be talking about some iPhone 8 features and rumors. Okay, and so let's go ahead and start with the brand new Linux kernel. The Linux kernel, which is kernel 4.12, was actually released on Sunday, July 2nd. And so it's been a while since we've actually had a kernel release. And Linus Torvalds, who, as anybody knows, is the creator of the Linux kernel. And he is saying this is actually one of the largest releases that he's had since 4.9. And he says there's like over 12,000 commits. That's a lot of different changes. And so let's go ahead and go over some of the things, and it's probably just going to be the top 5 things that are actually on this. Now, over 50% of the changes, which is pretty significant, over 50% of the changes is because of support for AMD's upcoming Vega series GPUs. Okay, which will be coming out later in the year. And as you know, AMD released their, the RX 400 and the 500 series earlier last year, and it was really successful. Actually, I have the AMD RX 470 as well. And so the AMD Vega series is their brand of high-end GPUs to go along with their high-end AMD Ryzen chips. And then later on, they have the Threadripper that are coming out as well, which is ultra high-end. And so that's a lot. That's a lot of changes just for a GPU. So that is really great. I mean, for people who are obviously gamers or who want to get more graphical performance out of their computers, the more support, especially for brands like Intel, Nvidia, AMD, the more support we could get natively in Linux for those, and that you don't have to reverse engineer some type of drivers, that's awesome. So it's going to be built into the kernel, and so that's great. And I will be talking about that further because that's already going to affect a lot of people who use Linux right now. If you want the latest and greatest, you're going to have to get a newer kernel. Okay, so let me see. The next thing we have is, secondly, okay, well, there's actually some stuff from NVIDIA as well. There's actually, it brings support for the GTX 1000 Pascal. So there's some support in there as well. And there's also 2 new I/O schedulers. Okay, so this is for these schedulers are Facebook's Kyber I/O schedulers and BFO budget fair queuing. Okay, and there's also XFS support, RAID 5.6 fixes, Git SMAP. Okay, that's the third thing. And I'm actually just reading this off of a site because they did a pretty good job of doing the top 5 as well. And number 4, there's also some Intel changes. Intel atomic mode turned on by default. And then number 5, there's some Power 9 and Power architectures that support up to 512 terabytes of virtual address spaces. Okay, and there's also some other power improvements to Gemini Namecheap. So what does all of this mean? I mean, all of this means is, I mean, at least for me, they're really Linux. As we get into further editions of the kernel, they are supporting more and more hardware, okay, which is an absolutely necessary thing, because whenever Linux started, because it was new and it wasn't the dominant platform specifically on desktops, as anybody who's used Linux for a while, drivers are really hard to find, and if you don't have compatible drivers for your operating system, then you can't use the hardware that you bought. Or you'd have to download some reverse engineered drivers that will make it work, but you won't get the full performance out of that hardware that you bought. Okay? And so as time goes on and the Linux kernel adds more and more native support in the kernel, drivers that really will work with this hardware, it not only makes things easier, like for example, if you bought, like the brand new AMD Vega GPUs, and you're running Linux and you have the new version of Linux kernel, well, it's going to work. I mean, it's going to work because it has support in it. So that's awesome, okay? Or if you buy the, NVIDIA GTX Pascal, it'll work. And so things like that, it just makes the whole process of using Linux much easier. And then if you are a business as well, right? Say, for example, you were running a graphic shop, right? Where you're using Linux machines to actually do a lot of graphic intensive type work. Well, now if you have native support for these higher end GPUs, then you're going to be able to get more performance out of these machines, and you're still going to be able to use Linux, okay? Which is awesome. And there's a lot of like special effects shop like Weather Digital, and I'm pretty sure ILM as well, they use Linux. I know Weather Digital for sure. And if you don't know who Weather Digital is, they're the same company that did Lord of the Rings. Okay? So Rose is asking, will Linux improve or solve screen tear problem instead of using Compton, which might or might not work? Rose, that really depends. I mean, because every hardware configuration is different, and also every version of the distro is different. So I can't say for sure if it's going to solve screen tearing problems for X machine. But once again, I'm going from what I've experienced before. Whenever Linux kernel updates get made, and then they do have better support for specific hardware and even some software related issues, some of the times it actually fixes it, but once again, it really depends on your computer and also the distro that you're running, so, but overall, this is a good thing. Now, there's also another one, USB protocol. It allowed it to act as an HDMI port and stream video. Okay, great. Let me see what else is there. Yeah, support for ARM devices, ARM64 devices. Okay. Okay, so that's, there's nothing like I guess for people who, like I myself, I've never developed on a kernel, so I am not that technical, okay, when it comes to Linux. That's uber technical if you're the type of person who manipulates kernels, okay? But overall, I go back to what I said earlier. With all of these huge changes, specifically to the AMD Vega GPUs, Linux is preparing itself for more and more into the mass market. Okay, so if you looked at Linux from the beginning, where it was just like command line, okay, and not many people use it. The driver support wasn't there. Pretty much nobody knew about it unless you were like a uber geek. And then if you think about the transition to when Ubuntu was first released, right? Ubuntu was the first version of Linux because Ubuntu is based upon Debian, okay? But Ubuntu was the very first Linux distribution that people who use Windows and Mac could actually use, okay? Once they get installed, of course. And so Ubuntu made a huge shift in like, okay, when Linux started, no support, nobody knew about it, okay? And then you went to Ubuntu where, wow, this is something usable. It actually has a GUI, that most people can use. And it's very familiar because it was very similar to Windows. And in some cases very similar to Mac. Basically, it's a GUI interface, so a lot of people were able to use it. And then Ubuntu also brought in like the whole ease of use. Okay, it was way easier to install, to get working than it was before. And then now I think Linux is transitioning more to like, okay, let us provide built-in support, technical things underneath, to where it'll work with way more popular manufacturers and devices, right? And hardware. Okay, so by doing this, more and more people are going to be on Linux. Okay, and Rose says, I guess these kernel improvements will improve gaming experience. Yeah, it will, you know. And once again, it is really up to I would say, developers to take advantage of these. Okay, but in general, if you have built-in driver support at the kernel level for these, that means that it's going to work with it. You know, I mean, there could still be some incompatibilities, but the fact that the drivers are there natively, that helps significantly. Okay, so I think this is just the next step in the evolution of Linux becoming more and more mainstream. You know, and you know, everybody's used Linux. I've talked about this before, of Linux taking over Windows in a desktop. I still don't see that happening. Okay, but with these constant improvements where there's more support for different hardwares and then different softwares, it just means that Linux is everywhere already, but it just means that Linux will be applicable in many more areas. We'll definitely see more people use the Linux desktop, in my opinion, because of this. Okay, so now, you know, now that people know that AMD high-end GPU is going to be supported, and then, you know, they're improving support for NVIDIA GPUs, guess what? Developers who develop video games, okay, that's another added incentive for them to produce games. You know, so obviously they have to make sales first, but I'm pretty sure as more and more people get into Linux, and then they know that their GPU will work with this and they'll get much better performance, and especially once again we talk about Vulkan, right, with that API working and everything, then guess what, more people are probably going to be using Linux. Like, well, let me try this. Oh, I could actually play games on the hardware that I have, and at the same time developers technically, they know that they can support these now. So maybe as people move over to Linux, they see that gaming's available, they'll buy more games, which means more demand. And then from a technical point of view, developers know that it's capable of, you know, working with this hardware. And so I think we probably won't see the effects of this because, you know, the Linux kernel, whenever a brand new version of the kernel is released, that doesn't mean that your version of Linux, your distribution, is going to get that update right away. Okay, unless you like manually upgrade your kernel, which you could do, but it could break things, or the version of Linux that you have has a rolling release, or the version of Linux that you have is one of those where it's like, you know, bleeding edge. Okay, but that also means that it could break things. So, you know, so my opinion is it's probably not going to be a year from now until you really start seeing the effects of this new kernel update. Okay, and I don't just mean like just the fact that you could actually install it, because you can install it if you want. What I mean is for the hardware manufacturers, for software application developers and so forth, for the business end of it, all that stuff's around it, it probably won't be a year, but my prediction is we're going to have more Linux desktop users. You know, and so I think the last time that I looked, the Linux desktop share, no, Linux, yeah, I think it's like 2%, 2.3 or something like that. Okay, I can't exactly remember, but it was near 3% almost. And so by next year, it might be over 3%. And then that's into the territory of Apple Mac OS already, because I think the last time I looked, Apple Mac OS was like 3.3 or 3.5, somewhere around there. So Rosa says the distro I'm using is using Jessie, perhaps next year. Yeah. But you know, Rose, the great thing about having Linux, and I think everybody knows this, is like, well, it's free, right? Okay. And what I like to do in mine, I mean, you know that I don't distro hop, but if there's a distro that I really want to try, or an operating system I want to try, Virtual Machine is my friend. Okay, so in that case, you could try out a lot of things, you know, to see if it works. You know, but when it comes to kernel updates and whatever, you know, it's probably best if you also actually have a physical machine. Okay, that's probably the best way. So if you have like an older machine, like I have like 4 different laptops, you know, older laptops, and so if I want to like experiment to the actual hardware, then that's what I would do it on. So if you have an extra machine laying around, that'd be really awesome. Then you could break things without, you know, having to worry. You know, I would always start with the virtual machine first, but if you really want to see how it will work on hardware, you know, without having to go through the virtualization stuff, then, you know, just do it on another machine, you know, to see if you can see any performance benefits out of it. And normally, I just updated my version of a kernel because the Linux Mint 18.1, I think it had like a 4.45 or something, and then I upgraded my kernel up to 4.8. And the reason why I did that is because the AMD RX 470 GPU that I had, the drivers, AMD wants you to use a newer version of the kernel. Okay, so I had to upgrade it, but because I did that, I've actually got performance gains out of my computer, and my computer is already fast, but I've noticed improvements to my actual gaming, which is really cool. So maybe I'll do it. I don't know if I can do a test later on because I don't have the older version of my kernel anymore. But whenever I updated the version of my kernel to 4.8 from 4.4, I was getting, on the games I was playing on Steam, I was getting like maybe on some games 5 to almost 10 frames a second improvement, which is awesome. You know, I mean, still, of course, it's not going to be as good as on the Windows for the same game because it's optimized for that platform. But like if I'm like running at 60 frames per second and now I have 65 to 70, that's awesome. You know, and I didn't have to like do anything. I didn't have to buy new hardware. I just updated my kernel. And so, yeah, so that's the first piece of news. The very first release of 4.12, obviously there will be updates to it. This is a huge release, and so I think that's only a good thing. That's going to allow more people to use it. So Rose, you asked, I thought Linux Mint keeps the old kernel when you upgrade. No, you can upgrade to a newer version of the kernel. I can't show you here because you can't see it, but if you go into your software manager, right, then let me see if I can go there real quick. Okay, let me stop that. Let me see. So I can't remember. Let me show you where it exit. Okay. So if you go to your software manager, and maybe this is also for people who are not familiar with Linux Mint. So if you ever wanted to update your version of the Linux kernel, you can also downgrade as well, but I don't do that. So if you go to your actual update manager, which is on the top right, it says update manager, and if you go to edit, or actually if you go to view and then you go to Linux kernels, it'll give you a warning because the Linux kernel is the core of your operating system. So you could, you know, if you put a kernel that doesn't work, that could mess up your operating system. So, and when you continue, what you see is, you see all these versions of kernels available. There's 4.4, 4.8, and 4.10. And so you could actually, you know, you could downgrade if you want, or you can upgrade. And so if you did want to try out different versions of the kernel, you could do that. But I recommend, if you are going to do that, back everything up first. Okay, because, you know, if the kernel causes problems or issues, then, you know, you still want to have all your data. So always back it up before you do that, okay? And also, if there are problems with the kernel and you cannot use your operating system anymore, be ready to reinstall Linux. I'm just telling you right now. So that's why I mentioned back up all your data first before you make any kernel changes, okay? So I'm going to close this up. All right, so yeah, so that's going to be a pretty big thing for them to have, you know, this new version of the Linux kernel to work with these upcoming AMD GPU, the Vega series. I can't wait to see what happens with the Vega series. And so far, I think AMD's have done really well with their previous RX series, the 400 and then the 500, and then also with their new Ryzen CPU. So I'm hoping that they repeat the same type of success or better with the brand new AMD Vega GPUs and also the AMD Threadripper as well, because I really want to see them add some more competition, add some more variety to the whole CPU and GPU market, which has been dominated by Intel and NVIDIA. AMD and NVIDIA, they've always been battling each other, so this will be really great. All right, so let's move on to the second piece of this week's news, and that is the Nasdaq glitch. Okay, so when I heard about this, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to talk about malware or something again. Okay, so thankfully that's not the case, but the impact of this was pretty huge. And so if you didn't know, earlier this week, I think it was July 3rd, yeah, July 3rd, right before July 4th, the whole stock market went crazy because the prices of some major companies, you might have heard of them, Amazon, Google, let me see, Yahoo, their stock, Apple, okay, all of their stock, and even Microsoft, yes, all of their stock prices was at $123.47. So you might be thinking, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters if your normal stock price, such as Amazon, was like $930 something dollars? No, $972.79. And then suddenly it just dropped down to $123.47. So your market value went down more than 50%. So that's billions and billions of dollars. And so if you're thinking, man, that doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does affect you because you're using all their services, all these companies. These are big multi-billion-dollar companies. And so if you are a stock shareholder, that affects you immediately because your stock prices, if you look at your portfolio, you just lost 50 or more %, which is definitely bad. Yeah. Yeah, Rose Monero, that would make it profit with Google to buy at 120. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so yeah, you're right. So there are people who could benefit from it. So if they saw this change, you're like, okay, let me go ahead and buy all these shares while they're cheap right now. I'm rich. Yeah, but they caught it before then. And even if you did buy it, they're definitely not going to honor that. Okay, and yeah, that's pretty huge. And what they're saying, what Nasdaq was saying, the glitch occurred. At first, when I read this news story, I really thought it was a malware problem, or maybe Nasdaq got hacked. You know, that's what I was thinking in my head, because that's the type of news that we've been getting. And this isn't something small. This is Nasdaq. This is billions and billions and trillions of dollars, and then all around the world. Hey, Lance. Good morning, Geek Outdoors. What's going on, Lance? Thanks for joining. Rose, Lance, and everybody else who joins this, I see the same people every week. I say it every single week. Thank you so much. It's absolutely fun. All right. And so this glitch was really crazy. I mean, and you know, this isn't the first time that Nasdaq has had glitches. Okay, the last time this happened, if I remember correctly, let me see. They actually had to pay. Yeah. So the last time this happened, the Nasdaq had an electronic glitch, which caused problems with pricing. And this was during Facebook's initial IPO. And because of that, the Nasdaq was forced to pay a $26.5 million or $26.5 million or 20.5 million euro fee or penalty for doing that. You know, I mean, so this affects everyone. So even if you have nothing to do with stock markets, you are using their services. They're trading billions and trillions of dollars all around the world, and so it's going to affect you. Okay, I mean, you have a job, yeah, it's going to affect you. You have a business, it's going to affect you. It doesn't matter. I mean, all these financials, all these stock markets are critical. They are a key part of every single economy worldwide, and so when this happened, I'm pretty sure people went absolutely bonkers. I mean, especially investors. I mean, I could see myself, like, say for example, you know, you were one of these large investment firms, right? And your portfolio, you had millions, or even if you're an individual stock shareholder, And then say you had like $10,000 in your account, right? If you would look at this, now you went down to like maybe 4,000, 3,000. Yeah, I'd be calling up my investment company right away. So luckily they caught this, and I don't know if it was an automatic mistake or a manual mistake, because the reason why it's exactly $123.47 is because this is test data. Okay, they do testing on this. And so unfortunately, the test data actually went to the live accounts, the live production, and that is bad. Okay, so to explain to you how this works in like corporate IT, and I think I've explained this on the last episode, but normally in a corporate IT environment, what you'll have is you'll have your development environment, development server environment. Okay, so that's where all your development is. You create the software and everything else. Okay, and then you might also have a testing environment as well. Okay, now sometimes the development and testing are the same, but normally I'm seeing the development environment, then you have a testing environment. So you do all your technical testing, you also do UAT testing as well, and you also use that environment for like if you're going to be using a new release of your software. Okay, or if you have issues that you need to debug. Okay, so that's why I said sometimes the dev and testing environment, they're one and the same. Okay, and then finally you'll have your production environment. Okay, so that's really how it works: dev, testing, and then production. Okay, and I'm not even talking about backup and recover or whatever. So that's normally how it works. So somehow this actually got into the live production environment, and so yeah, that's bad. That's not good at all. And I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure these companies, Nasdaq and everything, it's not like they have amateurs running this. They have the best of the best running this. But for something like this, and if it's truly what they say it is, I'm sorry, that's just extremely amateurish. Especially if it's a human error, that's even worse. Okay, if it's a software related error, okay, then cool, then your software needs improvements, and then you need to add different routines, different tests to make sure it never gets into the production environment. Viper29 Gaming, hey, hello, what's up, Viper? Oh, I just want to make a quick note. Maybe we'll talk about this in our bonus episode, but Viper29 Gaming, he actually had a PC setup on his channel of his latest PC, but I do want to talk about that later because I thought that was really cool, and it's running Linux, which is even cooler. Okay, and so yeah, so if it was like a software related issue, even though this is by no means a mistake that should be even acceptable, because you're talking about, like I said, trillions and trillions of dollars. I mean, total, if you think about worldwide, billions are being transferred. It affects everybody, okay? So, bad mistake. But if it was a human error that did this, even worse, okay? Because if somebody accidentally clicked the wrong thing or submitted the wrong thing, and you didn't have any checks to make sure that this is not a good thing to do, then that's really bad. So I'm hoping that's not the case. If it is a software problem, which I think it is, I don't think it was a manual process, because normally, especially nowadays, especially in technology companies and Nasdaq, that's technology. Okay, I don't care if it's stock exchange. There's a lot of technologies that go into a stock exchange. Believe me. Okay, and so a lot of these software development IT companies, or all the IT in the back end, normally human error alone will not destroy everything. Okay, I mean, I've worked on production environments where, people make mistakes. We're humans, right? Where you'll make a mistake and then it would blow away the production data. But if they were set up correctly, they would have automatic checks in place, software routines in place, backup and recovery routines or alerts that would catch this. It would say like, oh, this doesn't look right, we're about to blow away production data. Like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. If you've ever worked in a production environment, if you could delete a whole database, it's easy. You could just absolutely wipe out a whole production database. So if you have correct checks in place, that's not a normal activity. You wouldn't go and just delete a whole production database. That's just not common. And so I'm just things like that, so I'm thinking it is software related, but if it is caused by manual error, yeah, Nasdaq's gonna have to do a lot better than that. Okay, So that was the Nasdaq glitch. Initially, I thought it was something related to security. Who knows? I mean, hopefully it's not. You know, because that's what we hear in the news is normally not the what's really going on underneath. Okay, so move on to the last piece of news that I wanted to talk about today, and it's the iPhone 8. Of course, the iPhone 8. And there's been some mock-up design and also features that proposed features that are going to be coming out. And I don't know if you've seen them. I mean, these are mock-ups, and a lot of times, you know what happened. We all know this for all these new smartphones, especially now in the internet age. You pretty much know everything about the phone like months before it's ever released, you know, and especially if you could actually get the actual moding, or, you know, like sometimes if you look at like Chinese websites, okay, you'll see like cases being sold earlier than the release of the phone. And because of that, you can already tell what the design is going to look like, okay? Rose is asking, big deal about iPhone and Android, it's not boring. Yes, Rose, absolutely. And I did do a last episode about that, you know, like Apple versus Android, who cares? But, you know, this is news that's always going to be around. You know, it's as long as Apple keeps selling, it's going to be the news. And so I thought this was newsworthy. So, so far, just looking at the mock-up designs of the iPhone 8, man, it looks a lot like a Galaxy Note. And a Samsung Galaxy, as a matter of fact. Man, it looks so much like it, you know. And these are mock-ups, by the way. But every single manufacturer this year is going towards a bezel-less, you know, phone. Okay, LG G6, that was bezel-less. The Samsung Galaxy S8, that had no bezels. Okay, and so iPhone is going to be doing the same thing. And Viper29 Gamers asks, I have an iPhone 6, probably going to get Android next year just because you can do so much more with an Android. Yeah, Viper29, yeah, I agree. I mean, that's really why, I mean, I also did an episode earlier about the iPhone 10th year anniversary. And I would have got an iPhone if I could back then, okay? But I love Android, okay? And so the reason why I love Android is for a lot of the same reasons why I love Linux. It's because I have more freedom. I can do more stuff to it. Okay, but Android, it's getting more and more controlled, in my opinion. It's getting more like Apple, you know. I mean, they're becoming more like each other. And so hopefully there'll be another alternative. I was hoping the Ubuntu phone, Linux phone, would have been that alternative, because I would definitely jump over if I can. Because I mean, at least for myself, I don't use that many apps on my phone, you know. I mean, I just use it for the YouTube and the internet, you know. And so if somebody picked up the Ubuntu phone project, or some other Linux distro could make a usable, you know, distro for the mobile phones that actually give you internet and it doesn't crash, you know, that could actually do the main things that you wouldn't use on a phone, then I'll try it out, you know, because more and more now, like, since Android is becoming so much more like Apple in terms of the control and stuff, you know, you can still put different ROMs and stuff on it, but I just see to the point where you're gonna have more control, okay? And on top of it, I mean, they're looking at your data, okay? I mean, it's all these applications, Google itself, I mean, Android, right? So it's collecting a lot of your data. And so, you know, if there was another alternative where you could have more control over that, like, to me, a purely Linux phone like that Ubuntu phone, or maybe another distro, I don't really care, but a purely Linux phone, and they've tried this before, you know, Ubuntu wasn't the first one who thought of this idea, but one that's purely Linux, and that's not like a Linux kernel and then on top of all this other stuff, and that you have more control over your privacy and everything else, I love that, okay? And the one where I could have a lot of control, you know, I could put in ROMs when I want, you know, if I put something in, I don't have to ask for permission, you know, stuff like that, you know. So hopefully that still comes about. So right now, I don't know, you really only have Android or Apple, okay? But if I had to choose between the two, it's still going to be Android. But going back to the iPhone 8, man, it looks a lot like the Samsung Galaxy S8 from the mock-ups. And some of the new features, and you know, I gotta make fun of Apple on this, because their new features are features that other companies already did, okay? They just remarket it, okay? And a lot of times, I'm gonna have to say, they do make improvements to it, okay? However, the improvements work the best in their ecosystem. You know, they don't share it with anybody else. Okay, so one of the new features is probably retina scanning instead of using your, you know, your biometric, your finger. And I don't know what company's done that before. Samsung and many other Android manufacturers have done that before. So that's a new feature. Let me see if there's another new feature. Who knows? They might get rid of the home button. You know, one of the things that a lot of people were thinking that maybe the iPhone 8 will get rid of the home button and then have the whole screen be a biometric screen. You know, so when you touch anywhere in your screen, it would unlock it. Okay, which would have been really cool and convenient. But at the same time, how convenient is it really? You can accidentally unlock your phone just by touching anywhere. You know, so who knows? So yeah, so there's also another vendor said the Touch ID might be in the back. I don't think that's going to happen. I myself, I like the scanner in the back, you know, with the LG G5 that I have. It makes sense for it to be there. It's just naturally rested, you know, so that's nice. And yeah, facial recognition, I'm sorry, facial recognition and the retina stuff, you know, Samsung Galaxy's been doing that for a while. And let me see, is there anything else on there? Yeah, you know, probably won't have a earphone jack. That's a feature that they introduced on their previous iPhone, which is, I still think, extremely stupid. You know, unless you love dongles. And what else? That's it. It looks so much like a Samsung Galaxy S8. Oh man. Now, so iPhone and Samsung, they're really tied to the hip to each other. Okay, not just because they're competitors, and I think anybody who keeps up with them knows this. Because Apple buys components from Samsung. You know, Samsung is a huge company. They don't make just electronics. You know, they even have their own military, if you didn't know. Okay, they have they're in the shipping. They have shipyards. They're a huge company. They're a manufacturing business. I think their market cap is like $290 something billion. I think they're pretty large. Yeah, they're pretty large. And the largest market cap for an electronics company is still Apple. They're over $700 billion. For the market cap, but Samsung is huge. And so some of the things that Samsung provides to many other manufacturers are their semiconductors, their CPUs. As a matter of fact, this last year, I mean, just recently, it's reported that behind Intel, the second largest CPU semiconductor company in the world is Samsung. So, and also Samsung makes displays. You know, a lot of the phones that you have that use an OLED display or other technologies like LG does LCD, Samsung does OLED, and guess who's selling it? Samsung. And so in this case, the iPhone 8 is going to be rumored to have an OLED panel, and guess where they're going to buy it from? Samsung. And so Samsung makes money whether they're your competitor or whether you're buying from them. So, you know, that's smart of them to do that. So, yeah, so I think they should just call it the iPhone Galaxy. They should just call it that because it's basically a combination of both. And so, yeah, that's it for the iPhone 8. I mean, I'm not super excited about it myself because normally how the marketing goes for iPhone is every year we give you just this many features, right? And everybody hates it, right? Everybody hates it. But then when they release it, they sell billions of dollars worth because they know you're going to buy it anyway. And so that's normally how the marketing works. So this is the same way. Right now, everybody hates this. I don't think anybody actually loves it. And they'll complain, oh, it doesn't have these features, it doesn't have a headphone jack, oh, they didn't have the biometric screen. But guess what? Those are the same people who are going to be in line or be ordering online and paying crazy amounts of money, you know, $700, $800, including accessories. And then if you're international with the VAT tax in Europe and stuff, you're going to be paying over $1,000, and then especially in other Asian countries. And so, yeah, they're going to sell billions of them. Let's just say that. I myself, yeah, I'm not excited about it. I mean, in terms of phones, I'm more interested in like the mid-range, low-end range, like the Moto X, you know, because they have to like work harder, right, to gain your attention, you know. So a lot of times they're taking a lot more risks than these bigger companies, okay, and that makes sense because the bigger companies, they have a lot more to lose if they release or do something new design or new features. Because they have billions of dollars, they have tons of units out there, so they can't take as many risks as like a smaller company. Okay, so I'll be interested to see what else comes out of here, but nah, yeah, I'll just wait for like the Galaxy Note 8 to see if that's any good. Okay. All right. So that's all the main news that I wanted to talk about today. So I talked about the brand new Linux kernel, 4.12, which is awesome. Secondly, I talked about the Nasdaq glitch. Thankfully, they caught that early. And then finally, I talked about iPhone 8 features and rumors. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get into the bonus round. And normally our bonus rounds, we normally talk about Linux, which I don't care. I love Linux. I could talk about that all the time. Let me see. So Rose says, then wait 3 years, you need a new iPhone because the updates will slow down the OS and you need to upgrade. Yeah, but then every manufacturer do that. And so, I don't know if I should say this, but I used to work for Motorola. Okay, and I was talking to some of the engineers, okay, and I always used to wonder, like, how come they only have like a 1-year warranty on most electronic devices, right? And you know, it might be rumor, you know, it might still not be true, but it makes a lot of sense. And this is an engineer who worked at Motorola at the time, and you know, it's like he's telling me, well, they do that because they design it to break. You know, they design your electronic device, especially phones, something that you know that will make them a lot of money if you replace it. They're designed to normally fail after a year. Okay? And so that's why if you've ever had a smartphone, especially in the modern age, you notice like after a year, it doesn't perform as well. Yeah, planned obsolescence, exactly. Stuff starts breaking, and it's not just phones. Apple does it to their computers. Windows definitely does it as well, you know. And I could prove that point, right? Us being Linux users, right? I'll go back to the same thing right here, right? My Dell laptop, and I showed this last one. My Dell laptop from 2005, I could still run Linux Mint on this, but I can't run Windows. I mean, at least not anything that's Windows. Like if it's beyond Windows XP or even Windows Vista, it might have a hard time. You know, maybe it could run Windows 7. I don't know, but it's gonna be super slow. So it's this whole planned obsolescence thing. So and I know that it's done on purpose. I mean, just by the example that I showed you, the hardware itself is still capable of working. You can still use your hardware. Okay, so the planned obsolescence here is in 2 levels. Okay, the first level is software. That is the easiest place they could downgrade and say that you need to upgrade to the newest version. Because all they have to do is send an update that slows down your device, most of the times your smartphones, right? Or your computer, and now you can't use it anymore. Or the software update will break things, you know, like older devices or older software you can use with it, you can't use it anymore unless you upgrade to the newer version. Okay? And so the first place that they will make your hardware obsolete is with software. And then the second place is the actual hardware itself. You know, this isn't anything new, but if you remember electronics and cars back in the day, 80s, 70s, and so forth, right? What you notice is they usually lasted longer. Okay? That's why they had TV repair shops. You could actually repair TVs. I mean, if you're too young to remember that yeah, they actually had TV repair shops. You could get your VCR repaired, okay? Because they were meant to last, and so you would only have to replace the parts. But nowadays, who brings their TV to TV repair? Nobody. You know, because it's not built to last. They don't use the highest quality components. Okay, and so it sucks that that's where we live, but it's great that, you know, if you have things like Linux, you can extend your hardware for much longer. Okay, but now that we're so dependent on internet browsers, even that they're introducing obsolescence as well. So even though like my version of Linux runs fine on my computer, right? My browser runs like crap. I mean, so, you know, they can still force you to upgrade. But at least if you have something like Linux, you can use your hardware a lot longer. You have more control over that as well. Okay, and so another thing that I wanted to talk about, and I talked about earlier, was the Viper 29 gaming. Okay, so I did do an episode earlier about my Linux gaming setup, and what I really enjoyed was from people like Viper and other people who watch the channel. they actually have Linux gaming setups as well. And I think that's awesome. You know, because if you look up like gaming setups on YouTube, I'd say 99.9% of the times it's Windows, right? But like, what about us Linux users? I'm like, I want to see like Linux gaming setups, you know? And in this case, of course you could run dual boot, Windows and Linux. Of course you could do that, right? But, you know, there's not many gaming setups that's specifically built just with Linux in mind. And you know, when you build a PC, it's exactly the same. I mean, there's nothing like different from building a PC for Windows versus Linux. But it's just the fact that it is built specifically for Linux. That's awesome to me, you know. And so with things like the kernel updates, with more GPUs, more games, because I'm seeing more games in Steam now for Linux, I predict that we're going to see more Linux gaming PC setups in the future, you know, and I would love that, you know. And so what I'll probably do is maybe in a future episode, you know, maybe I'll see if there's other people who have a Linux PC, and then if it's cool, then I'll probably talk about it on the channel as well, you know. Maybe I'll do a future episode on that, you know, where I'll just talk about different people's Linux PC gaming setups, because right now we're still like niche, you know. There's not many people who searches for Linux PC gaming setups. But as we get more people in there, it's going to be awesome, you know, especially on Steam if it's cross-platform, like, you know, when we played that game River City Ransom on the PC on Steam, me and my brothers were able to play together. You know, they have Windows, I have Linux, so that's just awesome, you know. And so let me see some questions here. So Lance says, I had my Galaxy S4 for several years. See, that's awesome, Lance. You know, I still have my HTC One, as a matter of fact. Okay, but it runs super slow, you know, so it sucks, you know. But if I put a different ROM on there, it'd probably run better. Okay, but you know, that's not the fault of my hardware, you know. And of course, over time, your hardware does need to be upgraded, but that's really cool that you're able to keep it that long. And I have a flip phone still too. So my flip phones last way longer than any of my smartphones, and they're like $25. That doesn't make any sense. You're spending $700-800 for a smartphone, but my flip phone is more durable and it'll last longer. That's kind of crazy. So Viper29 says, I have such a hard time dual booting. It gives me so much trouble. Linux is great for retro gaming and indie gaming. Perfect place for that. Absolutely. I agree with you, Viper, because that's what I got here. It's a perfect retro gaming machine, but at the same time, because like I said, because of services like Steam, Linux kernel updates, more hardware manufacturers providing drivers for Linux and stuff, then man, we're gonna get to play more modern games. So you'll be able to utilize this powerful hardware that you have. Okay, because you know, I like everybody else, I want as much hardware as I could get. I don't care if my software doesn't take advantage of it yet, you know. I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing about money, right? Who doesn't want more money? Of course, I would rather have more money than not enough. So that's the way I think about my hardware. I'd rather have more hardware than I need than not enough. And so, yeah, it's going to be awesome. Let me see, what else is... Okay, Rose is saying, I'm still waiting for 3D virtual episode, though, on Geek Computer. Oh, yeah, yeah, who knows? I mean, if I could get that working sometime. I do have the LG, you know, a VR camera, but maybe I should try like an actual VR episode. You know, I think the last episode I talked about YouTube VR 180 or Google VR 180, and I'm pretty sure you could just shoot that with your phone and it'll give you 180. So I'm gonna test that out. And it would be really awesome to have an episode in VR 180. I'd like to see if it actually does anything. It'd be pretty cool to me. Let me see. So, hey, Jujov too. Hey, thanks for joining. Yeah, it's kind of late in the episode. This is like our bonus episode. So I'm just talking about whatever. Normally we talk about Linux. Let me see. So Jujov says, dual boot, no! I prefer my fix on Windows for gaming. More easier and portable for daily use. Sorry for my English. I come from France. No problem, Jujov. Oh, I just want to know something. I know we talked about this previously. You know, we have people from all around the world. I won't say your name of where you're from, but if you could just kind of tell me, well, no, then if people are watching it, they could see it on this message. Never mind. Okay, but I know there's some people from Canada, there's some people from France, and at times I think there's also been people from, was it, the last one was Denmark? Ireland? Yeah, so it's awesome. You know, I think there was some people from the Philippines too. So Rose is asking, I'm still running an old machine, so retro games is the only thing I can do on a dual core computer. You know what, Rose? Retro gaming, I think for me, if there's like the only gaming I could do is just retro gaming, that's all I need. I mean, it could run MAME. I'm awesome. I mean, right here, I actually have a RetroPie. It's a pretty sweet emulator if you haven't tried it out. It's really cool. It's a multi-system emulator. I still think I like MAME better still. It's just easier for me to use. Let me see what else is there. Okay, so, all right. So, oh, and also, if you didn't see my previous episode, you know, since we're talking about Linux now, you know, there's a new version of Linux Mint. It's Linux Mint 18.2 Sonia, and you could. I'll leave it in the description area below, or maybe a card or somewhere. You could go check it out if you want. But basically, Linux Mint 18.2, it didn't have a lot of huge improvements. Okay, it did have like most of the improvements were to existing applications like their text editor, their like image viewer, explorer, and some changes to the Bluetooth settings and also to the update manager. And it also had a new version of the Linux kernel. Okay, I can't remember which version of it, but I think I'm running a newer version of the kernel myself. And so, you know, if you did have a previous version of Linux, like Linux Mint 18.1, then I don't really think it's worth it to upgrade, in my opinion. But if you want to, it's a pretty simple process, you know. And if you do go to the Linux Mint website and you do download a fresh version of Linux Mint 18.2, you will get 18.2. So it does have a new version of the kernel. And I'm pretty sure it was 4.8. I'm pretty sure it was, okay? Now, I think the latest version of Ubuntu, it is running 4.10, the kernel, okay? So what that tells me is maybe if, and I'm not going to do this on my machine, but if you had an extra machine or whatever, maybe if you wanted the latest version of the Linux kernel, like 4.10 on Linux Mint, I think it might work, you know, because obviously Linux Mint is an Ubuntu-based distro, and so I think it would work. You know, maybe give it a shot if you want the newest version of the kernel. Now, also, in terms of other Linux news, I did see, what was it? It was like some type of security news. Oh, well, my computer's. Let me see if I can get there. There was some type of a security issue with Linux. I think it was like with systemd or something. Or some server. Oh, well. Never mind. I think I do enough of the security news every single week. Maybe I'll talk about that the next week. So, hey, what's going on, Taha? Thanks for joining. Kernel 1. Okay. Kernel 1.12 works with Ubuntu Mate. Tested it. Should work with Mint. Thank you. Yeah, that really helps a lot. So good. Maybe you could try it out if you want. Now, I'm just curious, for all of you who've actually updated your version, your Linux kernel, have you seen improvements in any places? Like for me, I mentioned earlier, I did update my kernel. So then, mainly for my AMD GPU, my RX 470. And when I did update the kernel, I did get better performance on my gaming. I got like 5 to 10 frames, depending on the game that I played. And so that's definitely an improvement. So if any of you have updated your kernel, if you've seen similar performance differences or something like that, that'd be great. And you know, like, if you already have a fast computer like mine, it's really hard to tell the differences, okay? Like, especially day to day. I mean, it just runs super fast, right? But about the only place that I can see a difference is when I'm gaming. That's about it. Everything else, it's already blazing fast, you know? And has anybody else like actually upgraded to Linux Mint 18.2? I don't know if anybody's upgraded. But I do have it on my virtual machine. And the thing that I love most about new version of Linux, I know this sounds crazy, okay? I love the new wallpapers. You know, I mean, the new wallpapers look awesome. You know, and so, so Jujob2 says, Rose, I agree, as drivers are not compatible with Ubuntu Mint for more graphicals. Yeah. Yeah, so if you are just catching this at the end of the episode, you know, you can rewatch this later, but at the beginning of the episode, I did talk about the new Linux kernel, 4.12, and then also how that's related to drivers and so forth. And I think, Taha, what you were saying earlier was, are are you saying that you were trying out the newest version of kernel? That's what I think you meant. You were trying out 4.12 with Ubuntu Mate. That's really cool, if that's what you mean. If you're running the latest version of kernel, that's awesome. You know, and as I said earlier, you know, if you are going to be running newer versions of the kernel, or maybe you're downgrading kernel versions, I always recommend you back it up first before you back up all your important data before you do anything on the kernel. Taha Gemini asks, I run it on my laptop. Cool, great. All right, and so I think that's it for this particular episode. Normally I try to keep these episodes within an hour. Rose says, I use MX 16.1 plan to install Ubuntu Mate on an old laptop. Yeah, a lot of people use MX 16 actually. So yeah, so I usually try to keep these live episodes to about an hour, you know, so it's like a little over an hour right now. So if there's nothing else, thank you all of you for watching once again. If you did enjoy these videos, be sure to give a like and subscribe. And as always, if you did want to support my channel further, you can do that at patreon.com/geekoutdoors. We'll see you on another episode. No problem, man. Thank you.